Magnus Carlsen is one of the best players in the world, being the world champion for over 10 years while achieving a peak rating of 2882. Magnus has crushed the competition. But before Magnus became the final boss of chess, there was another player dominating the field. This is Garry Kasparov, who became the 13th world champion after defeating Anatoly Karpov in the 1985 World Championship, before going on to cement his place as the greatest player of all time. But what happens when a chess legend meets a future world champion for the first time? The rivalry began during the opening game of the Reykjavik, Iceland Rapid Tournament, with Magnus being just 13 years old. This was truly the battle of the generations. But before the game could even start, Kasparov was nowhere to be seen. While Magnus was flipping through picture books and grabbing a drink, Kasparov was making everyone wait in terror. Finally, Garry shows up to face his youngest opponent yet. He takes his seat, and the game begins. Upon starting the game, Magnus opens with d4 and Garry responds with d5. After c4 and c6, the game turns into the Slav defense, an opening Kasparov has played thousands of times. Magnus continues by developing his knights to f3 and c3, while Garry, looking to close the position, plays pawn to e6. Magnus, unafraid of his much older opponent, applies more pressure with the move bishop to g5, to which Garry responds by reinforcing his knight with the move knight to d7. A few more moves get played before Garry decides to test his younger opponent with the scary move queen to a5. This move not only pins the knight, but also threatens to play knight to e4 on the very next move. Despite being so young, Magnus shows he's comfortable playing both offensively and defensively and moves his other knight to d2, unpinning and protecting the vulnerable e4 square. Garry puts more pressure on the knight and plays bishop to b4, making Magnus respond with queen to c2. Black castles and white develops his last piece with the move bishop to e2. Garry plays the provocative e5, but Magnus simply castles, inviting black to take on d4, which would open up the position. Before taking back, white kicks away the queen with the move knight to b3. These subtle, improving moves reveal the true potential of this young prodigy. The pawns in the center of the board get traded, and both players push their a-pawns. In this position, Magnus plays the never-before-seen move rook to e1, grabbing hold of the open file and looking to start a deadly attack on the black king. In the meantime, black kicks away the bishop and sets up his own threat on the b8-h2 diagonal. Magnus plays h3 while Garry goes after the unprotected bishop on c4. However, Magnus's last move removed the defender of the knight on f6, which Magnus takes advantage of and captures the knight with his bishop. If Garry recaptured with the pawn, his position would be completely lost, as the pawn on f7 is pinned, allowing white to infiltrate with his queen. Therefore, black takes the bishop on c4 with his knight, but Magnus continues the attack with the brilliant knight to e4. Here, Magnus sets up a deadly trap, as the natural pawn takes bishop would result in a forced checkmate in 4. Garry is in big trouble. However, the chess legend finds a way to trade the pieces without opening up his king. But it is Magnus who comes out with the better position at the end. Garry looks shocked. The world champion can't believe he's being outplayed by a 13-year-old kid, and neither can the people watching the game. In this position, white's best move is pushing the pawn to d5, as the pawn cannot be taken due to the hanging queen on c7. Instead, Magnus plays queen to c5, attacking the knight. Black defends with his rook, but Magnus takes advantage of this and is about to win the pawn on c6. The best move in this position for Garry is to offer a queen trade. However, that would probably lead to a draw. So, Garry, being the #1 rated player in the world, instead plays rook to e8, keeping the tension on the board. It's now the 28th move of the game, and Garry still hasn't moved his light square bishop. Unfortunately, white's next next move, rook to d1, allows black to develop his last piece, and Magnus's advantage is dwindling. Soon, the knights get traded, and Magnus sees nothing better but to offer a queen trade. With the queens off the board and players having opposite color bishops, it will be incredibly difficult for either player to win. A pair of rooks gets traded, and both players start bringing their kings into the game. While Magnus still has an extra pawn, the different color bishops mean that Garry can always stop the pawn from moving forward. Another pair of pawns get traded, and after some more shuffling, Garry Kasparov agrees to a draw. Everyone was left speechless.